Hello, you fuckers. It has been some time, hasn't it? As you may notice by the title of this video, I have decided to turn the one-off little spriting tutorial that I did with Cerebral and Metal into somewhat of a series. I don't think I need to state the fact that there is not going to be any set release schedule, nor is there going to be any kind of order to watch them in past really, this one being a good starting point. But what this will serve as is just as a way for me to put my thoughts on sprite work into a sort of video form, so that you all can kind of see what I'm doing and but understand the artistic decisions I made for Spectrum and other mods, and also be able to learn a bit from that and improve as sprite workers yourself. Because ultimately, as much as I am an arrogant bitch and, the number one hater, I do still want to see the art form move forward, and I do want to see you all move on to make greater and greater things. If you ever want to make me happy, go and make a Spectrum add-on. That is a serious thing, by the way, not just a joke. So, this is not going to be nearly as long as the Cerebral Metal bit, because I just want to address something real quickly, and that is these fuckers. The pigment jars, the pigment flasks, ink flasks is the actual name, of which I made, the new ones. You saw them just a bit ago, right up here. These were interesting to make. As you can see, these do not have the new lid, but that doesn't really matter for our purposes. I want to talk about how you make this, because I really feel that the state of dynamically colored items is kind of abysmal. People do not generally understand how you should approach these kind of things, and this shows in a lot of mods. I feel like you all probably have a lot of experience with this, and while a lot of you likely have not looked at it very closely, the more observant among you probably have realized that dynamically colored items tend to be just really ugly, and it's a very inconsistent ugliness. It tends to be the case that varying on the color, some can look fine while others just completely fuck up the base sprite. And I'm going to talk about firstly why that is, and secondly how to prevent it. Because it really is not something that feels intuitive, and it is also not something that I feel has ever really been addressed in any artwork tutorials, because it just is not something that you ever see much about. It is something that is really specific to Minecraft and Minecraft modding, because ultimately the color provider system, which is what results into kind of awkwardly colored sprites, is something that is very unique to this game. That said, I'm not going to go on this over long. So as you may see, here we have the based jar sprite. It's pretty simple, at least. Actually, no, it's not simple, but it's not special in any way, it's just a sprite. It's nice jar, it looks translucent, it has some specular lighting, it looks hollow. Ignore the brown jar, that was just a test version of it. There was a chance we could have ended up with this, but I decided to go against it. However, you may also notice this entire line of sprites. As you may have been able to figure from some of the showcases I did in insider trading, these sprites are what actually get colored. Anytime you see any dynamically colored items, you always have a monochromatic sprite as a base that the game internally recolors to do whatever it needs. This is what actually gets made into that. However, the way it does that is both awkward, and it is not clearly stated anywhere, the actual mechanisms of this. What I'm about to tell you now is something that I have figured out just from the years I've been working on this. So listen to this, because these really are some gold nuggets of wisdom. First and foremost, you're probably going to notice that, let's ignore the fact that I have so many of them. Let's use go ahead and shut all of them down. Let's only work with the base flask we have here, and with the full flask, which is what you see in the showcases. These are two fairly nice textures. One has lid, one doesn't. None of that really matters, I'm just filling up parts. However, you may notice that there are two textures here. This is not actually one thing. You know, it's a bit brighter with the overlay. Keep that in mind. So the basics of color providers, and I have the code open here for everyone that just likes to do art. Tough luck. We're going to reference the internals of the game for a moment. These color providers are simple in theory. You just have an item. The registry takes in an item and a tint index. And don't question this formatting a lot. I'm not going to explain how it works. Just stick with me on the pseudocode. I just explain the flow of logic. You have an item. When you register an item, it gives you the stack for the item and a tint index. The tint index, and hear me out here. The tint index is the layer you're actually working with. This name is stupid, but it works for our purposes. Why am I up here? The tint index is the layer you're on. In this case, for the optional in-color thing, which is what is used for the flask mainly. I don't really know. Let me see real quick. There, the flask uses this, and it's specifically for tint index 1. This is this middle layer, which is the tint full, which is the 100% tint you see here. Are you following? Because I hope you are. This is only going to get more complicated. This tint index is what tells the game what you're actually coloring, as I just noted. If the tint index is right, aka if you have the layer you want to work with, you take it, you get some data. In this case, you get the ink color of it, and if you have it, you convert that into an hex color code, an RGB hex color code. Don't think too hard about this code. You get a hex color code. Imagine you get, for example, if you have white, you will get 0xFFFF this for white. This is then used to actually color the item. So if we go to in colors, you have the whole list of colors here. And for example, if I go here to blue, which we will use for example, this funny number here translates to this color. You may recognize it because it is the in-game blue color. This color is what the game takes in to actually color the item. And here's where it gets complicated, because you may realize that I don't tell you how it colors it. Because nothing and nobody tells you how the game actually works with this. And I'm going to lower the volume of the music real quick, so you can hear this part really clearly, because we're about to get into the part that actually matters and the part that is actually kind of awkward to deal with. This color, yes, you see it, it's very nice, very pretty, gets applied onto the tint in a way that is equivalent, as far as I've tested, to a multiply layer. If you know what a multiply layer is, great. If you don't, look it up. I'm not Google. But it's basically a color blending mode that does interesting things. If you look at this, you can see that this is extremely strong. Matter of fact, this may actually look familiar because, especially if you've played Thaumcraft, you know, like Thaumcraft 4, Thaumcraft 6, this kind of strong color may be reminiscent of what some beast crystals looks like, especially the ones for stages that have fairly strong colors. It's because they do this exact same thing. They just give it a color to recolor the base crystal, which is monochromatic, to the color of the essentia. And then they don't do any other post-processing, and it just ends up looking like this. This is fucking ugly. let me just duplicate this so I can keep it, you know, on hand. This is fucking ugly. It's extremely strong, and it is actually rather interesting to note. You can see that a lot of the detail of the sprite is lost during this. It doesn't just look extremely blue, it looks flat. The colors are, the values are modeled. And that is because of how the multiply blending mode works. This is partially speculation, partial observation, but basically when you have colors and you are applying the multiply blending mode to it, then instead of seeing black and white and black as you know, light values, instead you need to see them as a mask. White as a pure color indicates that the program, in this case Minecraft, is going to replace this with the pure color you are giving it to it. So this color here will just end up being pure blue. Like this, once you apply the color provider, would just be blue. And as you start going through the colors and start going down, instead of it getting darker, while it does get darker, it also gets less saturated. The value, the vibrancy goes away. So it ends up in this kind of weird state where it is not just it is not just coloring the various saturation, the various values. It is actually using them as a mask, as a map for you know, it is mapping values to saturation, which is really bad, because if your whites are becoming pure blues or pure reds, then they stop being whites. You can't have highlights like that. You can't have really have shadows either. It becomes a mess, and it's fairly self-evident why you end up with this. Because this, if you realize the reason why it's up like this, if you actually compare it carefully, you can see it's mainly the highlights are more, the whites just vanish. You can see this color here, you know, the highlight, I can put it here. This is basically pure white, and when I compare it again to the color we have, it's the same color, because the multiply color blending mode just replaced the white with the blue. And of course, as I just noted, that is a massive issue. So of course that exerts the question of how do you fix this? How do you prevent your colors from being completely fucked? Again, you can see it very well here. Blue, perfect blue, a perfect match. As you go down, it becomes not just darker plus kind of desaturated. You see the same saturation, but because of color perception stuff, it ends up looking less saturated, which is also bad. So, how do you fix this, you may wonder? Here's where things get awkward, and also here is where we get to the part which you will understand why people don't really learn how to fix this, because it is confusing, and frankly I don't think even Mojang knows about this. Actually, no, Mojang definitely does not know about this. If you've ever seen in potions, they do tend to be looking quite ugly if they have more intense colors. They don't have any kind of color correction. And also, just to note, because of the way this works of swapping lighter colors to it, you know, white values, you know, whiter values with the color you're feeding to it, that's also the reason why this tends to work a lot less poorly with very light colors. If I instead go here for like a, let me see real quick. Let's see, not light blue, but pink. Pink is a nice example for this. Get pink, it's a suitable color. It's light, much lighter than blue. If you then go ahead and apply this to the tint layer that we have, to the monochromatic bottle, and you switch it to multiply, this looks a lot nicer. You preserve a lot of the values a lot more, because the base color is lighter. There is not this as much loss of values as there is with a much more saturated and dark color. If I instead made this into like black, nothing can be seen, which is an excellent example of what I mean. Similarly, if I instead keep light and instead just saturate a lot, You see the same loss you see with the blue. It's very finicky. It's fickle and it is really not ideal to work like this. You will at best only have it looking halfway good for really light colors. And for anything actually intense, you just end up with this flat mess. So for fixing it is where things get annoying. You see this? This is an overlay. Unlike this is not getting colored. This is just... how to put this? This layer gets tinted. Yes, this is what actually gets the color. This is not tinted. This is just a bunch of black and white values, which get overlaid on top of the tint color, the tinted layer that you have. I'm not sure how much this needs explaining, but since this isn't color and especially translucent, it just gets added to the values of the color underneath, which means that it makes them a lot brighter. What this allows you to do is effectively re-add value. You can redefine your colors to be able to end up with something that is once again actually distinguishable. Or to put it a bit more eloquently, this overlay layer that you have acts as color correction, allowing intense colors to actually keep the definition of the texture. If I get a blue layer or blue multiply layer back, as you can see, this looks like a mess, but once you put the overlay here, it is suddenly... wait, I have it in the wrong place. This needs to be above, which not, this needs to be applied after the color tint layer, or after the multiply, in this case. You put this on top and suddenly, that looks really nice. You can actually see the colors, you can actually see the texture, there is definition, there is something workable there. And if you realize, just to note something that I feel is valuable, in case you wonder if the multiply layer is a one-to-one match with how it looks in game, you know, if this is actually how the game does it, you can verify it just by looking at it. You can see this is the same as the blue color in the showcase. They're the same thing. So if you want to test out how it's going to look in game, you can just use a multiplayer layer under your overlay. But as you may notice, this actually looks good. It looks like a texture that was made by a sane person, basically. And you may figure that out. You probably hear out this and it sounds, okay, good, great. So why don't people do it as often, and why do you feel it's so unintuitive? And the reason is that while it looks nice and what the principle is simple, this type of texture is also really fucking annoying to make. Because as you may have noticed, the overlay is just a bunch of highly translucent values in a bunch of different, you know, translucencies. And there is only somewhat of a rhyme and reason to it. I can give you a tip that generally the list, as the alpha goes up, you know, as you get more opaque, the color, the value is going to start overriding the color more and more. So if I get something that is really easy to see, like this, really high alpha, which is very opaque, it takes a lot away from the texture. And you can use that to, you know, define things and get what you want. But that's also kind of a trade-off, because the more opaque this is, the more it desaturates the color underneath. It's very complicated to get right. Even if you don't get it right, I feel it's generally going to be a lot better than if you just leave the raw color into texture, but making it actually look good takes a lot of effort. And it's not really effort that can be easily explained. There is a lot of just practice that goes into it. You really just need to build an intuition for what works. And I don't like saying that, just do not. I really do want to give you all valuable advice about what to do to get better sprites and how to improve, but in this case, really all I can say is just do it and you will get better, because color correction for this just is a lot of intuition, a lot of knowing what to do from the heart. That said, I can tell you, past what I already noted, that you also generally want to use this as a guideline, the base texture as a guideline for what you want to do. A lot of the values are generally very close to what the base texture has, and what is getting messed the most with is the saturation. That said, once you have your overlay finished, and if it looks even halfway nice, you're going to get dynamically colored items that are just so much nicer than you will get otherwise. If you have any takeaway from this video, let it be that you really should color correct your dynamically colored items. It is essential to have them look halfway clean. And just to note and to build one last code parallel, or at least model parallel, note the order in which things are getting applied. You have the base layer, which in this case is not visible, but don't mind that. You need to have always the base layer because of how the tint is applied. The game is weird like that. You have your base layer, you have your tint, and then on top of the tint you have the overlay. It always goes in this order. If the overlay is below the tint, it's not going to do anything. As you can see here, if I put it below this, it just doesn't do anything. And if you put it below that, also nothing. It needs to be above the color tint. This is a technique that is frankly obnoxious to do, in my opinion. But you really need to do it. If you're going to do dynamically colored items and you're not going to go through the trouble to color correct them, just don't do dynamically colored items. They're going to look like dog shit. And I don't want to sound discouraging with this, because I really do want you to actually try this out and experiment with it. But I do feel the need to really emphasize the fact that this is not easy, and it is also very important. That said, I also don't feel it's conceptually complicated. I've been going on about and elaborating about each step, but in principle it is just any one dynamically colored item is 3 layers. Your base layer, your tint layer, and a color correction overlay. That's all. It's just 3 parts. Your tint is just a monochromatic layer, and your overlay is just another, not necessarily monochromatic, but just another layer that is highly translucent and which restores the values to the base texture. Just to note, I'm working, and I do feel as well, I need to note that I'm working solely with monochromatic colors here, partially because it's easier and I suggest you start with that, but also because since this is for the ink flash, I want to preserve the pure colors as much as possible. I don't want to shift them around very much. I really want to just have the pure color of the ink be reflected on the jars. But you can in fact just color this, and it will affect the color of the final textures, which this is getting into real advanced stuff, but this effectively allows you to use hue shifting on dynamically colored textures. I don't suggest you start doing that right away, because you're going to make a mess of yourselves and probably end up crying in a corner. But it is a good thing to keep in mind when you really want to show off your skills, or when you want to make something look really polished. For all intents and purposes, as I noted, this is just an overlay that applies on everything else, so you can do a lot of stuff with it, a lot of things with it. And to that end, I also want to note that since it doesn't get recolored in any way, and it just is on top of other things, you can do some other interesting things with it. If I'm going here today, I believe it is 65% overlay, yes. On the thin layer, you can see it just goes like this. It's fairly simple, you can see it overlay on the jar. However, the tint, the overlay for it, the color correction, has this just quirky little dot of opaque color that is drawn from the jar. When it is applied on top of the jar and on top of the tint, it blocks off the shine. Because the shine here looks slightly awkward with how close the ink is. This dot removes that and it allows it to look a lot nicer. That's a nice, simple, advanced use of these overlay layers, if you want to put it like that. And it is, I feel, a good way to think about how you can experiment with them once you're comfortable with the color correction part of them, because they really do allow you more than just making your... They allow you to do a lot more than just making your dynamically colored items not look abysmal. That's it. That's about everything that I wanted to say. You will probably see another video in this series soon, because this is really a fairly minor thing that I just did in the midst of starting to work on something else. But it is something that I felt I need to address. I've been wanting to say it for a while, but since I had just made the jars, this really felt like an appropriate time to address it. That's it. Be gay to crime, and have a good time of day. Bye, fuckers.